In a world where magic and swords are like peanut butter and jelly, Will's determined to become the ultimate badass wizard. But here's the kicker. Dude totally sucks at spells. He's all about swinging his sword instead, and magic just doesn't vibe with him. But does that stop him? Heck no! Will grabs his sword and sets out to make a name for himself. Along the way, he teams up with a crew of chill friends, each packing unique skills. As they battle gnarly monsters, Will discovers something crazy. He might have the power to mix magic with his sword moves. Now, he's on a mission to unlock this dope new power and show the world that sometimes the fiercest wizards are the ones who can throw down with both spells and swords. Watch out, Will's about to shake things up. It all kicks off at Rygarden Magical Academy, where only the real MVPs of magic get any respect. The narrator lays it down. Not everyone gets a fair shot here unless they've got some serious magical chops. We zoom in on our boy Will, deep in a dungeon, throwing down against some gnarly beast. The narrator wonders if a no-magic loser can actually survive in a place like this. Will's on a mission to prove everyone wrong by taking down every monster that dares cross his path. Next, we catch Will in class with his little buddy, Kiki. Professor Edward calls him up to show off his fire spell on some special ore. But guess what? Will totally flops. His classmates crack up like it's the funniest shit ever, while Cyan, this smug jerk, casually casts the spell from his seat like it's no biggie. Edward gets pissed at Cyan for flexing and reminds everyone that magic rules this school. He even throws it down. If you can't use magic, you don't belong at Rygarden. After class, Cyan and his crew, Lyral and Gordon, start roasting Will for being a total spell fail. But then Colette jumps in, telling them to back off. Cyan claps back, saying Will's dreaming if he thinks he'll ever become a legendary Magiavander. Later, Will thanks Colette for having his back, and they both gaze up at the sky. Will starts dropping knowledge about their world's history and the legendary Magiavander, 5 wizards who saved the world from the celestial host by sealing off the sky. Colette wonders if Elfaria, the powerful ice maiden, is watching over them. Will's convinced she is. We flash back to a younger Will and Elfaria dreaming about catching a killer sunset together one day. Elfaria says they need to become Magiavander to make it happen, and they swear to each other they will. Back in the now, Will apologizes to Professor Werkner for sneaking into a sketchy dungeon. But instead of getting his ass chewed out, Werkner gives him 2 credits for bringing back an evil guard specimen. Werkner warns Will that if he wants to climb the ranks like the Magiavander, he better step up his game. Spell work, writing, and praxis need some serious love. But Werkner doubts Will can ever nail the spell work since magic isn't his thing. Will argues that focusing on praxis could still get him to his goals, but Werkner shoots that idea down. He tells Will about a monster, a Baskerville, causing chaos on the 6th floor of the dungeon. Nobody's taken it down yet. As Will thanks him for the heads up, Cyan overhears and decides to make his move, heading for the dungeon to take out the Baskerville himself. We follow both Will and Cyan's crews as they explore the 6th floor. Cyan, still salty, thinks guys like Will don't belong at Rygarden. But then, bam! A massive beast called a Sentinel jumps out and attacks one of Cyan's teammates, sending everyone into a panic. Will hears the screams and bolts to help, finding Cyan in deep trouble. Despite all the bullying, Will hesitates, wondering if he should even bother saving him. In the end, Will says screw it and jumps in to help. He puts on the goggles Elfaria gave him, grabs his sword, and charges at the Sentinel like a boss. Meanwhile, back at the academy, Edward tells Werkner to send his familiar to check on the 6th floor. They discover Cyan went down there without permission, but Werkner isn't sweating it. He knows Will's got this. Using his crystal ball, they catch Will holding off the Sentinel, shocking both Edward and Cyan. Werkner explains that while Will might not be a spellmaster, he's got crazy strength, mad reflexes, and sharp observation skills. Eventually, Will takes down the Sentinel and, despite everything, helps Cyan out. Cyan, of course, is fuming. Will heads back to Werkner's office and scores 10 credits for his bravery. By the end, Will hints that this is just the beginning of his epic adventure. The scene kicks off with a flashback from 5 years ago. Will's getting roasted by his classmates, but later he and Werkner roll up to see Headmistress Cauldron at the Rygarden Magic Academy. Cauldron hands Will a sword and starts flexing her magic on him. Will straight up smashes through her magical shields, and she's low-key impressed. Cauldron says, "All right, kid, you can stick around. Keep leveling up. And who knows, you might even climb the tower and live out that wild dream with Elfaria." Fast forward to the present, Will's chilling in Workner's class. Workner breaks it down. To become a Magia-vander, you either gotta invent some brand new magic or grind out 7,200 Rigarden credits. He's like, "Look, making new magic is hella hard, so I'll help you rack up those credits instead." After class, Will and Colette take a stroll, chatting about his progress. Colette's like, "Dude, you've racked up so many writing credits." While they're walking, they run into Cyan and his crew. Liryl's hyping up Cyan, telling everyone he's soloed the evil Sentinel. Inside though, Cyan's fuming cause he knows it was really Will who did the heavy lifting. He confronts Will, but Colette's like, "Chill out, Cyan." He and his boys bounce, still salty. Later, Professor Edward rolls up on Cauldron, demanding she kick Will out. Cauldron's not having it, saying Will's already in his final year. Edward's like, "Nah, he ain't a real wizard." Cauldron whips out a book of student records and starts listing all of Will's achievements, shutting Edward up for a bit. But Edward's still salty, saying it bugs him that Will's gunning to be a Magia-vander. Cauldron gets it and tells Edward, "Fine, give him a test. If he flunks, you can do whatever you want with him." Later, Colette's helping Will stash his textbooks. Will thanks her for always having his back with her magic skills. Colette peeps his sword in the locker, and Will's like, "Yeah, I can't carry that thing around. Don't want to freak out my roommate, Rusty." Then we cut to the study hall, where Will's deep in some world history books, grinding for more credits. Colette tells him to chill, but Will's like, "Nah, I can't slack off on this." That's when Edward shows up and tells Will to meet him at the spell hall, ASAP. At the spell hall, Edward's like, "Here's the deal. Land a hit on me, and I'll give you 5 spell work credits. But if you fail, you're out of here." Will's struggling to land a hit and starts wishing he had his sword. Meanwhile, Kiki and Colette are at his locker. Kiki convinces Colette to use a spell to grab the sword, and she does. Back at the duel, Edward's all smug, telling Will to give up. He starts comparing Will to some old story about a wizard who took down a whole squad of dwarves with just a wand. Edward's like, "Your sword's never gonna measure up, kid." But Will gets back on his feet and says he's not quitting, cause he's doing this for Elfaria, the girl he loves. Just then, Colette shows up and tosses him his sword. Will grabs it and continues the fight, explaining to everyone that in the old story, one dwarf did land a single hit on the wizard, and that's all it took to be recognized. With that, Will lands one clean hit on Edward, earning his 5 credits. Cut to Cauldron and Workner, watching from afar. Cauldron's impressed by Will's performance. Later, we see Rusty out in the outskirts of Rigarden, cooking up a meal for Will, wondering when he's gonna come home. In the flashback, Elfaria's all like, "Will, you're brave and sweet." And then she hands him those goggles he's always rocking in the present. Will promises her they'll catch that sunset together one day, and she's totally hyped for it. As Elfaria heads off to the tower, Will's eyes start leaking. But when Workner rolls up, Will's like, "Nah, this is the last time I'm ever gonna cry." Fast forward to the present. Will's doing his paperboy hustle, delivering newspapers. Dude trips and drops the whole stack. While picking them up, he catches an article about Elfaria's new magic creations, and boom, the Upper Institute's got a new order in place. Will's shook when he realizes Elfaria's behind it. Back at the dorm, he hits up Rusty, asking him to whip up a magic item, cause Elfaria's order wants Frostwalker ice cores. Rusty hands over the goods, wishing Will good luck. Will heads to the 4th floor of the dungeon, where Cyan and the other students are handling Frostwalkers like pros. Then, Will spots some giant penguin-looking monsters messing with a girl named Iris. Like a hero, he jumps in and saves her, and she's like, "Thank you, thank you." Meanwhile, Workner's in the middle of a magic lesson, and Rose pipes up, asking if he thinks Elfaria's a top-tier mage since she invented her own magic. Workner's like, "Heck yeah, she's probably the best out there." Back in the dungeon, Will and Iris are still roaming around. Iris says she wants to be useful to the Magia-vander and dreams of holding up the real sky someday, hinting at the Great Barrier. Will explains how Magia-vander made the Great Barrier using crazy powerful magic, but when that barrier drops, the world's gonna be swallowed by darkness and the calamity's gonna hit. Iris drops a bomb, saying she met Elfaria in the past and how Elfaria saved her from some monsters, sparking her ambition to chase her goals. Will checks out the area and senses a strong Frostwalker nearby. He tells Iris that even though he doesn't have magical powers like her and the others, he has a lot of experience and research skills. As they enter the Frostwalker's territory, they unexpectedly find a Frostrex instead, Iris points out that it's a powerful beast worth 6 credits. Will struts over to Iris, showing off some dope magic items he snagged from Rosti. With a cocky grin, he claims he can take down the Frost Rex without breaking a sweat. Using his athletic skills, Rosti's gear, and a killer spell, Will goes full beast mode and defeats the creature. Iris can't believe her eyes. She's totally impressed by his badassery, but there's something off about her reaction, like she's got a hidden agenda or something. She starts wondering if she should report Will's epic win to some top-secret peeps. Will doesn't waste time and shows Iris the ice cores he just collected from the Frost Rex. He suggests they bounce back and regroup with the others to hand over the cores to the folks who requested them. Iris gives him a nod, and they're off. Later, Iris strolls through the wizard tower of Mercedes Carlis, feeling all kinds of magical vibes. She bumps into several Magia Vanda, Carriot, Zio, and Eleanor. Elfaria's there too, looking all mystical. Carriot complains about being stuck in a boring meeting, while Eleanor's sweating bullets over whether they'll have enough warriors for the Fated Day event, worried that history might just repeat itself. Zeo turns to Iris, eyes wide, and asks if she found anyone who can help them stop the Fated Day disaster. Iris pipes up and suggests they recruit Will. Some are hyped about the idea, but others are like, nah, he's not ready. Just as Eleanor and Zio are about to throw down over it, Carriot jumps in with a chill vibe, suggesting they wait for the Grand Magic Festival to make a better call. He, Eleanor, and Zeo peace out, leaving Iris and Elfaria to chat. Iris looks at Elfaria, serious as ever, and says, Will's a solid warrior. Elfaria, with a sly smile, summons a crystal and calls out Will's name, ready to see where this wild adventure will lead them. In a world where students must earn 12,000 credits to advance to the Upper Institute and become magic vanders, Will, Cyan, Colette, and others participate in a magic exam to earn credits. During the fight, other students find it hilarious that Will, a magic learner, resorts to using his fists against a golem. Struggling to keep up, Will is knocked down, disappointing the spectators who expected little from a bookish student with poor spell work. Meanwhile, top students Lehana, Wignall, and Julius excel in the exam, with Julius expressing his desire to challenge them someday. Later, Julius and his friends encounter Will, ridiculing him and reminding him of the upcoming Grand Magic Festival. This event piques Will's interest, and when Colette joins him in the cafeteria, she urges him to find a scout for the festival. She explains that if one of the 4 tower factions chooses him, it could bring him closer to his goals. Despite her encouragement, Will is hesitant to follow through with her suggestion. As they head to their lockers, Colette senses something strange and discovers an inhibitor and a sound-dampening barrier nearby. Using Kiki's magic, she breaks the barrier, revealing a hidden stairway that leads to an underground location where several students are gambling on the Grand Magic Festival's outcome. They spot Scion and discuss Lehana, Wignall, and other students with him. Before leaving class, Colette asks Will to join her on a dungeon adventure, but he declines, stating he has to work at Gina's tavern that night. At the tavern, Will serves beverages to dwarven customers who excitedly discuss the Grand Magic Festival. Gina advises him to focus like Rosti, another worker at the tavern. When Julius and his friends arrive, they mock the tavern's atmosphere and demand food and drinks. Will explains the dwarves' precarious position in society, arguing that antagonizing them would worsen the situation. Confronting Julius and his friends, Will demands an apology, but they refuse. A fight ensues, and Will knocks out Julius's companions. As Julius prepares to retaliate with ice magic, he hesitates, recognizing Will's determination. Instead, Julius orders Will to participate in the Grand Magic Festival, intending to humiliate him. Will agrees, but insists that if he wins, Julius must apologize to the dwarves. In the capital of Magic Stadium's athlete waiting room, Colette and Will take a moment to relax as the Grand Magic Festival kicks off. A woman named Mercedes gives an opening speech, setting the tone for the competition. Nearby, Rog Holland, a scout from the Fire faction, instructs his subordinate to keep a close eye on the surroundings, uncertain of where the next golden egg may appear. Students chatter excitedly about the upcoming sky race, with many betting on Lehana as the favorite, considering her status as the best in the academy. Meanwhile, Mercedes converses with Iris about the scouts hidden among the audience. Iris notes that this year, their Earth Princess is not competing in Magecraft. She then hints that the tug-of-war over promising students has already begun, mentioning she has her eye on a specific participant before departing. Sion soon enters the waiting room, greeted with cheers from his friends as he prepares for the crown attack. Colette had asked him to meet her, hoping he would join her team. Initially confident that he was the obvious choice, Sion's enthusiasm wanes when he sees Will sitting next to Colette. Clearly displeased with Will's presence, he is reminded by Colette that their team must have at least 21,000 combined credits for the competition. As they discuss strategy, Julius and his friends stroll by, and Colette mentions the tension between Julius and Will, leaving Sion puzzled. After a few words from Myers and Edward, a group of elves perform a spell to initiate the crown attack competition. The elves create various zones that participants must navigate, and Myers elaborates on the differences between each domain. He also outlines the items participants must claim to secure victory, warning that there will be many obstacles and opportunities for sabotage along the way. Pointing out competitors, Myers highlights Will, drawing laughter from the crowd as they mock his decision to enter the event. Undeterred, Myers officially starts the competition. Julius and his team dash toward the block obstacles, which suddenly transform into golems. Will, Colette, and Sion quickly join the fray, racing toward the golems as the excitement of the festival escalates. Colette uses her magic to make a powerful fist-like device called a gauntlet for Will. He surprises everyone by using it to crush the golems in his way. Meanwhile, Sion thinks about his past experiences with Will during the crown attack event. As Will and his team push through the obstacles in the Badlands zone, some people cheer for Will, while others say Colette's magic is helping him. Despite this, Myers tells everyone that other squads are struggling. When Will and his friends reach the last zone, they find traps set by Edward. They overcome the challenges, and Will thinks about setting an ambush for Julius near the event's crown. Suddenly, Julius attacks Will, but Will dodges and avoids serious damage. They start to fight until Sion uses a fire spell to interrupt them, telling Julius to leave. Colette realizes Sion was trying to hit both Will and Julius. In the chaos, Julius hits Colette with ice magic, and Sion takes the chance to focus on Will. Will loses the gauntlet and his sword, and Sion tells him to pick up his sword and fight. The tension rises as they stare at each other, ready for the showdown. Many years ago, when Will and Sion first started at the academy, Will was the kid everyone picked on. He always had notes stuck to his back calling him worthless. Sion couldn't stand watching this, so he decided to step in. In his own strange way, he burned the note and told Will he would be his underling so that Will wouldn't feel alone or useless anymore. But Will just stared blankly and walked away, making Sion really mad. Fast forward to now, and Sion and Will are still at each other's throats. At the capital of Magic Stadium, Myers informs the crowd about the strange things happening with Will's team. Edward speaks up, arguing that the Tower Scouts at the Grand Magic Festival won't approve of Will and his team fighting. Meanwhile, Rusty and Kiki are worried about Will. Iris shows up and sits with them, saying she's cheering for Will because someone told her about him. Rusty is shocked to see Will getting more popular. Meanwhile, Colette tries to run to Will's side, but Julius stops her, and they end up fighting. It turns out Julius has somehow cloned himself during the competition, and his clones appear in different spots during the crown attack event. Wignall confronts one of Julius's clones, defeats it, and picks up an ice shard it left behind. After some chatter from the spectators, we return to the duel between Will and Sion. A montage shows Will being bullied by his peers, with Will narrating that he feels like a failure and just wants everyone to leave him alone. Back in the fight, Sion summons a fiery falcon to attack Will. Will plans to chop down the falcon to reach Sion and successfully defends himself, catching the audience's attention with Sion's magic skills. The two boys argue, with Will expressing his anger towards Sion while wanting to focus on defeating Julius. Sion lists everything he hates about Will, feeling jealous that Will gets attention from everyone else. Will understands and fights back, defeating Sion's falcon and trying to hit Sion. Colette jumps in, stopping the fight and telling Will that she has already defeated Julius, who then disappears. Sion calls out Colette for her torn clothes, but she snaps back, calling him a misogynistic pig and reminding him that it's his fault they're in this mess. Colette urges Will to move on since he has unfinished business with Julius. Will drapes his robe over her shoulders, thanking her sincerely, making her blush. He picks up his sword and tells Sion they'll settle things later. Just then, Julius and his team are about to be declared champions when Will suddenly rockets into the stadium, locking eyes with Julius and challenging him to a fight. Sarissa quickly spots Elfaria dozing off and wakes her with a smack to the head. With an air of authority, she chides Elfaria for always napping or daydreaming at the tower's base. Groggy and irritated, Elfaria asks what Sarissa wants. Sarissa hands her a stack of papers, insisting she review the candidates recommended by the scouts, boasting that they have a solid lineup this year. She highlights Julius, noting he's a perfect fit for the Ice faction and is currently shining in the games, even suggesting he could be her successor. Elfaria doesn't disagree. Meanwhile, Will and Julius face off, neither willing to lose. Will struggles against Julius and his 4 ice clones. As the battle rages on, one of Julius's clones explodes, trapping Will in an ice prison. Werkner, Edward, and others realize Julius has learned one of Elfaria's greatest spells. Julius plans to expose Elfaria's magic to the world. Will manages to break free and fights back, only to be trapped again. He escapes once more, knocking out Julius's allies and exposing Julius's reliance on his friends. Cutting back to Elfaria and Sarissa, Elfaria admits Julius has potential, but insists she prefers a lone sword at her side. Hinting at Will, the fight continues, with Julius summoning more clones in anger. Despite his increased numbers, Will defeats the clones and knocks out Julius, shocking the crowd. Mike announces Will's victory, struggling to believe that a no-talent like him took down someone with over 10,000 credits. As the chaos settles, Wignall swoops in and claims the victory for himself, leaving the crowd in disbelief. The Grand Magic Games conclude, and Sarissa delivers the news to Elfaria, who is so ashamed she can't show her face. She wishes for a spell to erase memories or turn back time, but Sarissa refuses to let her use such a forbidden spell. Tearfully, Elfaria insists she never intended to bully Will. She just wanted to keep him all to herself. Back at the arena, Cyan is stunned by Will's win over Julius and vows to defeat him someday. Meanwhile, Colette checks on Will, who apologizes for their loss but reassures her that he kept his promise. The scene opens with Donnan and his dwarf friends congratulating Will, Colette, and the team for their Grand Magic Festival performance. Colette quickly reminds Donnan that they didn't win and no one got scouted, blaming Cyan for ruining their chances. Donnan understands, but is still thrilled that Will defeated Julius. Meanwhile, Julius is stuck doing labor for Gina, as the dwarves insist he apologize through hard work. He dashes around, embarrassed. Colette then confronts Werkner about Will, questioning whether people will treat him differently after the competition. Werkner believes they will. Later, a group of students approaches Will, eager to recruit him for the upcoming all-student praxis event, which involves a week of dungeon exploration. Colette jumps in, arguing that Will shouldn't join anyone's party after the way he was treated before the festival. Will, however, is soaking up the newfound attention and disagrees. Colette insists they have plans for tomorrow, leading to a discussion about her date with Will. Rusty then asks if Will plans to hit the dungeon since there's no school. Will tells him he's going shopping with Colette to pick up some gear. As he compliments Colette on her outfit, Rusty shows up, introduces himself, and makes a silly face at Colette, making the moment lighthearted. We get a montage of Rusty constantly interrupting Colette's attempts to get close to Will. Later, Colette confronts Will about his relationship with Rusty. He describes Rusty's quirky antics just as Rusty arrives with drinks, cozying up to Will. Colette and Rusty argue over who deserves Will more, with Rusty declaring his love for him. Suddenly, Lihanna pulls Will aside, asking him to join her at a nearby tea house. Inside, Wignall, Julius, and Cyan are already there. Lihanna expresses her desire for Will to join her party for the all-student praxis event, sharing her insecurities about her abilities and her family's troubled history. She dreams of becoming a Magia Vanda. After her heartfelt speech, Wignall, Cyan, Julius, and Will agree to join her. We then cut to Werkner lecturing students about the upcoming all-student praxis event, which is 10 days away. He announces that the 7th to 10th floors of the school dungeon will be unlocked for monster hunts and credit gains. Edward also warns the students about the risks involved, reminding them that some could die. Finally, Will and his classmates arrive at the all-student praxis event. Colette insists on attending to stay by Will's side. Rusty bumps into them, telling Will he can't participate, and Will expresses his gratitude for the magic items Rusty supplied. Edward readdresses the students, announcing that the event has officially begun. The scene shifts ominously to 2 men committing a violent act at an undisclosed location. At the Praxis event site, a proctor announces the event's commencement. Lihanna, Will, and their party arrive, only to be swarmed by crimson ants. Before Will can react, Lihanna charges in and wipes them out. While exploring new locales and defeating monsters, Lihanna asks Will to distribute food, but Wignall refuses to let Will serve him, deeming him unworthy. Lihanna insists they first tackle the luminous neighboress before dealing with the remaining monsters. The scene shifts to two men, one unnamed and the other possibly headless, who laugh after slaughtering monsters and participants. Back with Will's group, they reach the 10th floor of the Praxis event. Suddenly, a giant monster attacks Wignall, sending the group tumbling to the 11th floor and splitting them into pairs. Colette rushes to aid an injured Lihanna, who reassures her and wants to regroup. Will offers assistance, but Wignall declines, only asking for medical supplies. Meanwhile, Werkner discusses the situation on the 8th floor with Professor Eliza, who expresses concern about the dangers facing those on higher floors. Edward calls off the Praxis competition, seeking Werkner's help to uncover the cause of the anomalies. As Will and Wignall navigate the 11th floor, Will advises against using search magic, sharing a calming plan with Wignall. They encounter pig-like monsters, Gergesa, and Wignall struggles to fight one off. Will swoops in to defeat it, explaining why Wignall's illusions didn't work. Though he appreciates Will's support, Wignall acknowledges he still has room to grow. Wignall laments that he's the last elf standing at the academy after 6 long years. Every other elf has ascended the tower, leaving him branded a disgraced failure. Lihanna chimes in, sharing her own disappointment. She's watched countless talented peers ascend, while she feels trapped in a small pond, despite her title as #1 in the academy. Wignall confesses he grew up alongside the Elven Queen, Eleanor, whom he deeply admires. He trained relentlessly to match her skills, but all his efforts felt in vain as she soared past him. Determined, Will tells Wignall that they're more alike than he thinks. He promises to stand by Wignall's side until he's strong enough to tackle challenges alone. As they push forward, defeating wave after wave of monsters, Wignall can't help but wonder why Will hasn't abandoned him like everyone else. Will tells Wignall he's sticking around because he knows he's not a total jerk. Kiki suddenly senses a monster lurking, but Wignall can't track it down with his search magic. Will warns that the dungeon is cranking out fire critters called Balkars, and they're tough to take down. He's convinced elven illusions can still work on them and urges Wignall to back him up. Wignall, feeling the pressure of Will's hype, hesitates but starts to ponder his words. As the Balkars swarm, Wignall's illusions flop, but Kiki's got Will's back, pushing Wignall to dig deeper. Inspired by Will's support, Wignall finally taps into his magic and wipes out the Balkars. Bowing to Will, he admits he's earned his respect, and they shake hands like true homies, ready to keep exploring. Will whips out Rosty's Seeker map and explains how it, plus Kiki's Sniffer, will help them track down Colette and Lihanna. Meanwhile, Julius and Scion are in a classic bro argument over resources until Scion senses some bad vibes. A pack of evil sentinels rolls in, and they're about to throw down. Edward is busy saving some students from another squad of evil sentinels and tells everyone to bail to the 6th floor. Back with Will and Wignall, they run into Scion and Julius, who spill the tea that they've taken out the evil sentinels, but still can't find Colette or Lihanna. Meanwhile, Lihanna and Colette are facing off with Headless and his sidekick Marze. Headless spills the beans about their plan to wreck the Great Barrier. Just as he's about to throw hands, Will and the squad swoop in. Marze yanks Headless away, insisting he stay focused on their main mission. Headless then goes and summons a monster named Duke with a flashy transportation spell. And now, standing before Will is the evil Grand Duke, rocking 270 credits, which means he's as strong as a mage with 270,000 credits. Will's jaw drops as the beast charges at them, and he and his crew quickly backtrack to plot their next move. On a cliff, Will and Scion scope out a mob of monsters under Duke's command. Julius and Colette roll in, and they start brainstorming their game plan. Will, ever the overachiever, suggests taking down Duke first, saying, "If we drop the big bad, the rest will bail, and our peeps, Werkner and Edward, can swoop in for the rescue." Everyone's on board except Julius, who looks like he just sucked on a lemon. Will sweetens the deal by promising to share one of Elfaria's secret techniques. After that, Julius softens up a bit. Fast forward a bit, and Colette, Julius, and the squad jump into battle with Duke. Julius whips out Elfaria's Arsweiss spell that Will schooled him on, and they start throwing spells like confetti. Lihanna tries to land a hit, but Duke blocks her like a pro. Will and his sidekick Kiki jump in to back her up, but when Duke launches a gnarly attack, he wrecks Kiki's barrier and Will's beloved goggles. Lihanna and Wignall decide to go all out against Duke, which makes Colette and the others raise their eyebrows like, "Are you guys nuts?" Wignall and Lihanna are struggling against Duke. while Will's feeling down about losing his goggles. Cyan steps up and tells him to snap out of it. Come on, dude, time to put your game face on. Will nods, thanks Sion for punching some sense into him, and re-enters the fray like a champ. With fresh determination, Will and Colette charge back into the action. Sion joins the fray, but Duke isn't having any of it. Suddenly, a crystal drops in front of Will, triggering a flashback of a woman, a baby, and a cloaked figure. The woman cryptically says, "One day, wand and sword will meet." Back to reality, Will gets a light bulb moment. He turns to Cyan and shouts, "I need some magic backup. The answer is a wand and sword." Cyan blasts Will's sword with fire magic, igniting it like a freaking lightsaber. With his blazing sword, Will strikes down Duke. Just when victory seems in sight, a mob of monsters, sentinels, and guards come barreling in, drawn by the Duke's death. Will and his crew realize they're totally screwed, exhausted, and outnumbered like it's nobody's business. Out of nowhere, Aaron Mysterious, the old king of Magia Vanda and the strongest wand, shows up, leaving Will like, WTF? With a wicked spell, the Lord of Light flips the battle's script, blessing all the magical warriors with some serious light mojo. Everyone's in awe, but Will can't shake this weird connection he feels with Aaron. Then this dude named Finn jumps down, surprised that the sword's still alive, and introduces himself to Will. Meanwhile, Marze breathes a sigh of relief, glad to dodge a bullet, but the bitter taste of losing 11 professors still stings. The faculty did their best to save the students, but the grief hangs heavy. Cyan, ever the curious cat, asks about those creepy figures from before, and Wignall admits they were tough enough to take out the professors. Colette is still reeling from Professor Bruno's death, and Will steps in to comfort her. Julius can't help but think how lucky they were to be saved by the mysterious Noah. Lihanna, initially all about that recognition from the tower, now realizes how badass her team is and gives them props. Will can't stop thinking about Finn, that strange kid who claims he's 7 forever. He's a dungeon whiz, chilling on floor 49 and connected to the High Wizards and the 5 Supreme Wands. Finn's just back from a gnarly expedition, delivering a mage-killing weapon to Cauldron, director of Rigarden Magic Academy. "This thing isn't made for good," he says, eyeing it with suspicion. Meanwhile, tensions simmer between Will and Cyan. Cyan won't let that promise slide and challenges Will to a duel, ignoring Colette's warnings to cool it after their last brawl. But they're both itching to push their limits and climb the damn magic tower.